Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are very honored to have in our panel Mr. Angus Phillips from Oxford University. He's an expert in book publishing industry. I'm Panagiotis Kapos. I'm the Vice President of Hellenic Foundation for Books and Culture, but my main field is a researcher and a lecturer, and I have read all the books of Mr. Phillips, and they're very useful for my research. And also I have the opportunity to know a lot of his colleagues and his work, and in Ionian University, and all the presentations that they are having, and also the conference that they're having in Ionian by the book 10. I just wanted to say that we are expecting to hear from Mr. Phillips in particular, and of course from the other distinguished colleagues, his views about the publishing industry, the transition, and also the opportunities and challenges that publishers and all the book publishing ecosystem is facing. So thank you very much for being here with us, and we are expecting to hear your views. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. In actual fact, we have, because Nadim has kindly agreed to be on this panel, we slightly changed the angle of it. So it's the timeless attraction of book publishing in an AI age, the art and science of publishing from the inside, and opportunities for books in translation in 2025. And as our conversation develops, I am sure that the latter part will become more relevant. I'm Jax Thomas, Director of Bologna Book Plus, the expansion into general publishing from the iconic Children's Book Fair in Bologna. I'm delighted to be here with two authors who, as you said, are celebrating Greek editions of their respective books. And in fact, from the left, I'm going to give a little bit more detail as well. Professor Angus Phillips is director of the Oxford International Centre of Publishing at Oxford Brookes University. But he was previously a publisher at Oxford University Press, has consulted for many publishers, trained many publishers, and nurtured the talent of both undergraduate and postgraduate students fortunate enough to study on the internationally acclaimed publishing degree courses that Oxford Books run. And those degree courses have been quite a game changer in the recruitment of tomorrow's publishers in the UK and around the globe. The 7th edition of his book, Inside Book Publishing, is available in several languages, and I'm delighted is going to be published for the first time in Greek later this month, I understand. By which publisher? Papazisis. And then to my immediate left, Nadim Sadek, according to the appropriately AI-generated biography, studied pure psychology at Trinity College Dublin, and manages an artist, Shafri, signed by Warner, and presents Boss Bikes Club, a YouTube motorcycle review channel. Now, the reason I think your biography is interesting, Nadim, because of the AI-generated aspect. So I've added you're half Irish, half Egyptian, raised in Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and Europe, and you live in London. I think you've also created and sold a market research agency, bought and sold a Scottish island, are a marketing expert, and a well-established entrepreneur. With Shimmer, Don't Shake, published by... Go on, say it again.
I can't. My book is more yellow than it is.
Published in Greek already. So we have a complete publishing expert who's gone through, in a way, the 7 ages of publishing in the immediate last decades. And we have what some might call a disruptor into publishing. And I think that, first of all, I'd like to ask Professor Phillips what he believes the real challenges are, the top 3 challenges that face, let's keep it to trade publishers today.
Efkarisko, very nice to be here in Thessaloniki. Thank you very much for the invitation. Is that working okay? Yep. Three challenges, okay. Jax has sprung that on me. Well, I think the first one is readership. If you look at the reading habits of young people, there is some worry in the UK about parents reading to children, but I think there is quite good evidence of the strength of reading amongst primary age children. But when you look at the top 10 activities for teenagers, book reading drops out of that top 10 list. So I think that's the kind of call to arms for publishers, really, to make sure that books remain centre certainly in schools, but also in the challenge of other media is there to be countered. AI is definitely another key challenge for publishers at the moment. You can have browse through Amazon and find lots of AI-generated titles, and how do readers distinguish those from what publishers are producing? So the brand of publishers becomes ever more important in that AI challenge environment. And then I think the challenge is to find exciting new opportunities, and of which audio is obviously one at the moment. Audio sales continue to grow, and certainly the experts in audio, and Carlo is in the audience here, authors need to be thinking about that market as well as a print market for their books. So it has interesting opportunities as well as a challenge for how authors write and prepare. That sort of disappeared. Hello again. Yeah, we're back. So that's kind of three key areas.
Thank you. And Nadim, do you want to come up with your top three, or have you got 23?
Goodness. I mean, Angus is so much more of an expert on the ecosystem and the history of publishing than I am. What's interesting for me is that I've conducted a long and varied career in different industries. So coming to publishing 2 or 3 years ago allowed me to perhaps have a fresh perspective. And the reason that we started in publishing as a business, we're an automated advertising business, is that we saw some characteristics in publishing that were more present than in almost any other industry we looked at. One of them is having what we call a deep inventory, or a long tail, a backlist. So tons and tons of things which have been made, which are good products, which you need to sell. And the second one was a discoverability challenge, where it was hard to find those things beyond the front list. It's quite hard to find anything else in the catalogue. And then the third characteristic that was interesting to us was that we wanted narrative depth or psychological depth. And we, of course, discovered that in books. There's almost no greater narrative or psychological depth than there is in a book. There is in podcasts, there is in some music, there is in some video games, often in the creative industries and movies. But those characteristics of publishing were interesting to us. Long tail, not moving, under-monetized assets, discoverability challenges, frustrated readers, frustrated authors, and actually under-compensated publishers. And then huge psychological depth that was really interesting. So I don't know if they're the most important characteristics, but they're the ones that we alighted upon to say we could have a positive effect on this market with AI helping to bring these hidden gems to life and to bring them to shimmer in the light. That's why we're called Shimmer.
So that's quite interesting. That is looking at all challenges really as opportunities.
Yeah.
Whereas in actual fact, some of the readership challenges, I think, while they are opportunities, in a digital age, capturing that reading for pleasure space that you talk about, post age 11, is actually quite a difficult thing, and it's going to be where the digital worlds coalesce with challenge and opportunity, feeding off each other.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting seeing each batch of students come each year to the programs, and if I look back 20 or 30 years, they were all professing that they loved literary fiction and Jane Austen and things like that, and today they love genre fiction, romantasy, and a completely new wave of authors, and of course Book Talk has been a part of that opportunity, and I think for publishers, the kind of tram lines that we had before have changed completely, because you used to do hardback, you used to do trade paperback, then you did mass market paperback. Now you've got ebook and audio to put into the mix as well. but you've also got BookTok generating interest in a backlist title from 5 years ago, and suddenly you're getting this spike in sales and people saying, what's going on here? And the algorithms are throwing up interesting opportunities for the backlist as well on social media. And so, yeah, for publishers, it's kind of quite exciting terrain, but it's not that familiar terrain they would have known 15 years ago. It has changed completely.
So presumably, actually, you know, publishing, those of us who are old enough to have been in publishing for decades, we all learnt our craft, really, through apprenticeships. Actually, we started as juniors and we worked our way up and we gathered knowledge on the way. Actually now, do you think that really for entry-level jobs in publishing to have completed a course is actually almost essential because of these extra dimensions that simply weren't there 4 decades ago?
Yeah, I think, I have an interest because I teach publishing programs, but yeah, this definitely gives you an advantage in the marketplace in terms of securing a job. But yes, I think it creates very rounded candidates and very rounded publishers, and getting that understanding of the market, because the market is driving so much of what happens at the moment, and having that opportunity to study the market, I think is really important. And some of the key drivers that drive forward publishing, I think it's really useful to have an understanding of those and our courses give you that overview, which I think if you just start in one function in publishing, you don't necessarily achieve that.
One of the things that you said, Nadim, is the word discoverability, which, as we know, in a digital world is absolutely key, but is something that academic and STM publishers have been doing as ever, ahead of trade publishers for years. So can you give us some, if you were going to talk to a trade publisher and say the top 3 things you should be doing in terms of discoverability, what would they be? Easy wins.
Goodness. I think there are so many. Well, I mean, I come especially from a perspective how you apply AI to the publishing industry, so they tend to be my solutions. But I think there's some really interesting new technologies that are going to make a big difference. You know, within AI, there's specialized iterations coming, you know, most weeks, but there's some really interesting ones. One of them is what I'll call multimodal interactive books. Living books, if you like. They're books that you can live with and argue with. I don't mean to say that I don't like a printed book. I like a printed book. They smell interesting. You remember where the word was on the page. You stay up all night, cuddled up, you know, reading a book you can't put down. It's a very special experience. But when we look at readership declining, and you look at the way, I mean, I watch movies at home with my kids, and the director has given their whole heart to making this beautiful shot and to take it from that angle and to light it and to do the costume. And the kids are looking at Instagram and half watching the TV. You know, so we have a multimodal, interactive society that can't do one thing at a time. That's just the reality of the way that people consume things. So I think fundamentally a new iteration of the product is a good way to go after discoverability. Audiobooks is one. You know, ebooks is another, but I mean, I've got 2 copies of the same book, an ebook, which I read, and then I stand up and go for a walk with the dog, and then I get irritated because I can't find where I am on my audiobook. So this new product that I've seen is interesting in that it's one file that you read as an ebook, you then click on a button, and it starts reading to you as an audiobook. You can switch languages and modalities and stuff, but then you can say, God, that paragraph was annoying, send that to Jax. And it goes into my contacts, it sends it to you and says, Nadim says you're going to find this annoying just like he did. What do you think? So you're beginning to live with your book. It then says, and the man was in a monsoon, but I don't know what a monsoon is compared to a typhoon. So I say, illustrate it for me, and it shows me that. And then I get to the end of the book, and I think that was rubbish, terrible book. There must be contradictions and alternative theses to this. Which 3 authors have written books that completely contradict this and give me a synopsis of their work? And it then does that. But also along the way, I might have heard that the sea was blue, and I think to myself, do you know, I don't understand why the sea is blue. Nobody's ever explained it to me. And I pause and I ask the book to explain to me, why is the sea blue? So we've got this multimodal interactivity. I think if that product is successful, it's going to be a really interesting transformation of what the author's work is into something that we live with. So I call them living books. There are several other technologies, but I don't want to hog the mic, that I could tell you about, that are equally fascinating.
Well, I think that's a good moment to ask Angus, who has written a book on this subject, as to what is a book?
Yeah, well, a separate book that I published is with Cambridge University Press called "Is This a Book?", where we actually tried to look at how the book has changed, because you used to be able to define a book quite easily as a printed product, but now we have e-books, we have audio book. We could start an argument now as to whether an audio book is a book. I ask my friends, some of them say an audio book is a book, others say it's not a book because it's different experience. And in fact, it uses a different part of your brain when you're listening to an audio book compared to reading. And reading is an important skill, so we don't want to leave that behind just by saying, well, audio is equivalent to that in terms of listening. But yes, we concluded that part of what a book is now, it's a business model, because you could put that content up on the web and no one's going to pay any money for it. But if you package it up into a book, in whatever form it is, you can charge money for it, and it is a reliable business model that publishers have used for many generations. And it's really interesting that there's been a lot of experimentation around apps and interactive ebooks and things like that, but publishers have often come back to the mainstay with the printed book as the heart of it as their business model, because that's how they've made money out of it. And even the large commercial publishers lost a lot of money over apps and over, think of Dorling Kindersley and the CD-ROM and things like that. If you look back over the history of publishing, a lot of money has been burnt in the area of digital publishing, trying to do something very fancy. So actually that long-form text read, publishers still find is a reliable business model. And as we see newspapers stepping back from doing long-form, for example, a lot of them don't have long-form articles in the same way. Where are you going to get that considered argument about what's happening in the world today? How do we understand our world today? I think the book, as that long-form read, we really need to be singing the praises of it to people, especially at this time in the world.
I think it's very interesting because the rhetoric at the moment... am I back? No? I'll shout. The rhetoric at the moment is very much the key difference between, if we're talking about the definition of a book published by a publisher is actually the fact that the publisher takes responsibility for the content. And we know that we've had various, not scandals, but certainly times when over the last 5 years publishers have had to withdraw books from the market that have caused offence or are not as well researched or are, basically plagiarism. So the publisher does take responsibility for the text, and copyright is at the heart of that, really. And I just want to quote something from your book where you are quoting Michael Basker, and a lot of people know Michael Basker, a great thinker. He says that AI is a paradigm shift. Writing is no longer the province of human beings. AI will dominate the discussion and practice of publishing for decades to come. Commercial challenges, legal ambiguities, ethical worries, and the potential dilution of human creativity. AI is responsible for all that. Commercial challenges, legal ambiguities, ethical worries, and the potential dilution of human creativity. In Chennai recently, I was almost stoned off the stage when I said that I thought that AI, just publishers and creators, will find ways, creative ways of working with AI. It doesn't have to be the death of the book as we know it. But an author got very cross with me when I said that, because books can only be written by authors, whereas in actual fact I think AI can help that process. And I know that you've got some interesting examples of that, Nadim. Do you want to talk about
Yeah,
tricks?
sure. Yeah. Well, there's a few different things, actually. I was talking to somebody earlier on today, and they said, how can AI play a positive part in creativity? And I said that I think what publishing is going through is a kind of movement from increasingly confident adoption of AI for corporate efficiency, moving through to a more exciting but hesitant embrace of it as a creative collaborator and an emancipation, a kind of giving us liberty with our creative instincts. And that'll actually include 8 billion people rather than the few that can write or draw or sing at the moment. So there are a number of tools or a number of ways that you can use generic AI to do this. So if these microphones keep coming and going, if you're writing a book, and like I've written a children's book recently, and at one point a cobra bites a dog, and I thought, well, I don't want the dog to die, so how do I write about what would you actually have to do to stop a cobra from dying, a dog from dying from a cobra bite? It's not a tourniquet, you mustn't cut the wound, you have to lift the heart above the wound site, and so I suddenly knew the truth of venom in a dog, so I could then write the story in a productive way. People wouldn't go, oh, that's rubbish, that's not the way a cobra kills a dog. Trivial, but really helpful. You might also say, if I'm writing stories about a dog and a child having adventures, what are the persistent themes that you always see in children's literature? It tells you all the sorts of things, and you think, well, has anything ever been written about, going parachuting together? No. And then you start dreaming about what the plane would be like to make it childish, and the AI helps you to iterate. It collaborates with you patiently. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't, get judgmental. It just helps you to iterate your ideas. So there are lots of ways of just using generic AI, and then there's some very practical new applications. One of them is called Editrix, which is an Indian startup, and it's a software created by the former editor-in-chief of Penguin Random House in India. She's a fantastic editor. She actually edited my children's book and said, you should do these things, and gave me tremendous advice on it. And then she said to me, if you had used Editrix, you would have got much more positive and useful advice than I have given you. And that's quite a thing from a senior editor to say that. And so I put the book through Editrix, and it was amazing how subtle and nuanced it was. It said, for example, I've read your whole book, there isn't any colonialist tone to it, but this anecdote that you tell here could be misunderstood as you thinking that this little boy is superior to that local village boy, so perhaps reconsider whether you have that vignette in your book or not. Really helpful, and that can only happen with AI. Did it in about 30 seconds. I read my whole book and came out with all of these things, which I can work on when I'm in an emotionally positive state, when I can take criticism well, and when I can then iterate at my own rate, rather than sitting there wondering whether the editor has actually read the book yet, and so on. There are so many different tools that help us to do this.
So I suppose that interactive AI versus going to the Bodleian and looking up things in encyclopedias.
Yeah, I mean, the AI and its role in education is another subject which we could move into, but we haven't got time today. But I mean, yeah, what actually are students learning now if they're using AI? And should we be teaching them to use AI better, or accepting that they will be using it?
Isn't there a school of thought now, though, in education that where before people were terribly worried that AI would denigrate the level of education because of cheating, but now actually it's being used as a partner, and so the thinking has moved on.
Yeah, I think we have to work with it. I mean, the problem is academics are obsessed with sources for everything, and often you can't tell where AI is sourcing stuff from, and it has been known to make up references and things like that. So yeah, there are problems still around that area that need sorting out, and I think there needs to be greater transparency about when AI is giving you a result, what it's drawing on, and the sources that it's using. And I think that would inform people better. But I mean, in terms of generally in publishing, there's a lot of tension amongst authors and publishers around the role of AI, and I can think of a publisher in the Far East that said to me they're 30% more efficient because they're using AI to write educational resources. I can think of a publisher in Latin America who said they're using AI to generate videos, short videos to go along with their educational materials, and yet I talked to a literary agent who said I would not license AI translation, that it's not something our authors would accept, the use of AI for translation. And then I can think of a London book fair, somebody told me they were starting to experiment with AI for commissioning books, and I told this to another publisher who had the equivalent fit that you were talking about in Chennai, yes, at the thought that this was even being considered. So we're at this point in publishing where these things are being worked through in terms of, how do we work with this new technology, and what are the implications for contracts and how we work with authors. All this has to be worked through.
Well, coming back to your incredibly comprehensive book, Angus, I think that one of the things that is possibly at the heart of this is that we talk about book publishing as one industry, but in actual fact, it's a lot of different villages in a lot of different geographies. And so AI, as such, that argument is going to differ enormously.
Yeah, I mean, in many countries, publishing is educational publishing, it's schools publishing. I mean, that's the heart of publishing in many countries around the world. And as trade publishing grows, obviously that is a different environment as well. But yes, one of the chapters in the book, I look at the different characteristics of different parts of publishing. So academic publishing, schools publishing, language teaching publishing, children's publishing, and trade publishing. And it's an important point with the students that they realise there are different dynamics between different sectors of publishing. As you say, different parts of the world have different cultures, and the same cover is not going to work necessarily in every territory. Maybe you need a different sized book, maybe you need to have flaps, maybe you need a different image on the cover, all those sorts of interesting cultural differences, which makes books really interesting. And the fact you don't necessarily use the same cover in the UK and in the States as well, so America, so because there are different views about cover design there.
Well,
So
I think we're
just take
two
one
very
example.
different countries, if I might say so.
Indeed.
But even the tension within a publishing house that has a literary list and a commercial list, call me a Philistine, but the commercial books do underwrite the prize winners that are perhaps a longer tail. And I can see that those who are doing volume might well look for some efficiencies that come with AI, whereas an awful lot of your students that I've spoken to come in because they love literary publishing, and I think that might be the last bastion of. But that doesn't mean to say that because you've written a book that wins a prize, you don't want to find a huge audience where you'll come back to your company. Yeah. So there is a tension.
There is.
Sorry,
No.
No, I think that's one of the beauty of publishing as well. I mean, my book's about the commercial side of publishing, but I mean, if you want to establish the credibility of a publishing house, you want to win literary prizes, you want the best authors, and then other authors will be attracted to your publishing house. So I think that's the beauty, marrying the commercial side with editors and executives in publishing who really want to publish the best books and feel passionate about the books they publish in. I think that's what makes publishing different from other fast-moving consumer goods areas, where that passion that we put behind those projects, I think, is, and it comes from the author to start with. What makes it such an amazing industry?
I think the point you made, Angus, about us being in flux, we're in the process of considering what AI can do for publishing, is so true. I gave a talk this morning where I essentially highlighted the many different applications of AI in the publishing workflow. But there was a group of 5 or 6 women who looked at me with hostility at the start and smiled a little bit at the end. And then they came up to me and I said, was that useful? And they said, we're all translators. And we came here hating you, and we're leaving thinking we're safe. And what I told them about was my book, for example, it's about the application of AI to publishing. It's got a limited audience, particularly in English. There's a few publishers that'll read it and then that's about it. But it would therefore never be translated. There would never be a budget for it to do that. It's not worth translating this book and putting it into smaller markets than the US and the UK, where it was published. But we changed the economics of it by doing an AI translation and offering it to publishers, saying, we've taken one of the variables out of your value equation, and this book, which would never have been translated, is now translated. So no translator lost their job. And in fact, what's happened is that we produce about an 80% acceptable translation, and then editors take between 2 and 4 days to polish it to a place where it's completely acceptable for the market and for the publisher's standards. So you have my words being disseminated much further into the world than I could ever have anticipated or have afforded, simply because of the use of AI, without damaging anybody's reputation or their work, or their profession or their livelihoods. So they actually all came away thinking there is going to be quite a lot of AI translation. It's getting better. It's more suitable for business books where conceptual communication and the clarity of that is important than, let's say, in literary fiction, where the art is in the articulation. That's where you truly need, human finesse and subtlety and nuance. But that's one of many different examples of how AI is actually supplementary to what's existed before, rather than replacement.
Yeah, and it always comes back to the economics, I think, publishing, because we've seen how publishing has changed with the advent of digital publishing. True print on demand has kept academic publishing very profitable as a result, because you can print copies to order. There are academic publishers now who do not hold any stock at all. They purely print to order. So you're actually, that customer of one becomes part of the market, and it's economic to supply it. And same with audio files. It may be there's an author, it's not economic for them to go into audio at the moment, but AI could provide that opportunity. So you could have the book read by Jax Thomas in the voice you choose, and again, it may be a very niche market for that author, but AI could solve the economics of that issue, because doing audio production is really quite expensive, and so it could revolutionise the cost of that.
Economics and print on demand sustainability.
Yeah.
True.
And that's another theme in the book, is sustainability.
Yes, which is definitely one of the big challenges in an industry that does rely on paper.
Well, also, and if you put something on LinkedIn about AI, you get somebody saying, but what about all those power banks that are powering up AI all around the world?
Yes.
And so there's a lot of anxiety around that at the moment.
Indeed. I mentioned that, the UK and the United States are two very different countries, and indeed they are. And the United States has the absolute luxury of being a self-sustaining market in terms of books, because of its massive population, and is a very vibrant book market. They're always ahead of us, and we always learn from them. Is there anything, Angus, or indeed you, Nadim, that that is being trialled in the States, that is adopting AI in a positive fashion, that will become every day in the UK and Europe?
Already it's being used by marketers, and that started in New York to a great extent, but that's being adopted in the UK as well. It shocks me to say this, but sometimes AI can write a better blurb than the editor sitting in their office, and obviously Nadim's built his company partly around that. But yes, securing the correct metadata for a book, and the different copies you need for different parts of the value chain, AI is proving already. Editor at Penguin admitted to me that AI is doing a better job of that now. So it's definitely
and press releases and advertising, actually, quite often. It's a good first draft, isn't it? Yeah.
So that is a clear something that's come from America and has been adopted quite quickly in the UK.
If I can just give you a slightly different perspective on this, which isn't so much a positive adoption, it's a threat to publishing from AI. I think AI is the new super weapon. It's recognized as that. And AI needs fuel. It needs words. It needs to understand data. And we are in some ways paralyzed by the discussion around copyright and the inappropriate use of unlicensed manuscripts and copyrighted works all around the world, and that's being debated, and it's in law firms, and it's going all over the place. Who knows where that'll end up or when it'll end up? In the meantime, I don't think that it should be beyond our imagination that an authoritarian decision maker could simply decide that their AI has to be the best AI, and if it needs fuel, they'll just take it, and they'll forgive whoever uses that fuel in an unauthorized way. So I think there's a much greater threat to copyrighted works than we're anticipating, and I think in a fairly impulsive way, we could see a number of different countries just saying, we're waiving all copyright and we're giving this fuel to our super weapon that needs to get ahead now.
And I think that takes us back neatly, doesn't it, to something else that is I've lifted from your book, Angus, which is saying that the copyright environment is being challenged. What sets publishers apart from social media channels is that they take responsibility for their content, which we've touched upon. The arrival of AI and the consequent availability of fake and unvalidated content highlight the opening for publishers to stress their brand values. Now that, from what you're saying, lobbying governments is going to be, and I know the EU takes the AI copyright bill incredibly seriously, but you know, it sounds like a real burning platform. What should we be doing? Fake news being, and unvalidated content being one of the biggest threats. You know, medicine, science, technology.
Yeah. I've been lucky enough, I mean, in my career to work with a huge amount of different industries, from alcoholic beverages to insurance to mobile phones to, you know, custard and all sorts of sweets and things. Custard, yes, excellent, yeah, all sorts. And the thing that really strikes me about publishing is how underdeveloped, I'll just be blunt about it, their belief in brands is, A, at a publishing house level, and B, at the author level. And brands are shortcuts for people. We know we have a limited ability to navigate an ecosystem of things that we like and we're loyal to in our lives. And brands help us to do that. But with books, we've got this strange kind of one-night stand relationship where we might buy one book from one author once, you know, and that's it. And you have to try and seduce the person to do that and then not care about them afterwards. But if brands were used better, particularly in the AI proliferation of nonsense world, we could use their imprimatur, their shortcutting of saying these values, integrity, truthfulness, honesty, whatever, you can be assured of under this brand name, would be incredibly valuable. And it's the time to do it.
I have to say that's where Amazon and Apple get it really right, because if you like one author, they are shoving the rest of those books straight at you and recommending other authors. But Angus, in terms of the copyright challenges and knowing from the inside in publishing, and you know, knowing copyright inside out and publishers' attitudes to copyright, you know, are we fighting the wrong battle, basically? Because Nadeem will say the tech guys will come in, and because publishers are being slow to actually put their wares in front of them in a commercial way, we're going to lose out.
But to be up to date with what's going on, the publishers are making millions of dollars out of the AI companies at the moment. Maybe not quite as much money as they should be, and there was initial reluctance around that, but even a trade, HarperCollins has done a deal around non-fiction titles with an AI company.
Secretively.
Yes.
They wouldn't tell you, would they?
Well, I asked them who they sold the content to, but they wouldn't tell me. But I do know. But it was just kind of, I thought I'd ask them. But so there is some money appearing in authors' royalty statements, including for mine for this book, as a result of some of these deals. And there are different voices around as to why this is happening. And but basically they want quality content, and that we're going to get more specialized AI products coming out with, working perhaps in dentistry or one area of medicine and things like that, and they want the very best content, and that is where publishers come in with the very best content. And to remember when Google Books started and they wanted to start building their own intelligence in Google, they decided that books was a really good place to start, because that was going to help them with their automatic translation, etc., because books are quality content. We've got to come back to that.
A little bit like Nadim starting with books.
That's but do publishers recognise the value of that to the extent perhaps they should need to? But anyway, that's
And are the contracts and is the copyright robust enough, and is it evolving enough? That's one of the things I'm fascinated by, because we are, we talk about copyright all the time and the sanctity thereof.
Well, and it's the bill going through the UK Parliament at the moment, and an amendment was voted down this morning, but I haven't read the full debate in Parliament yet. So, I mean, this is happening around us at the moment, between creative companies and the feeling of government that, as you say, this is if we're going to get ahead as a nation, we've got to give everything we can to the companies now, and they're going to love us, and we can develop the very best as a result of this.
But that is surely short-termism.
Well, I mean, it is. It's interesting, but that's the world we're in at the moment. Yeah.
Do you have anything to add, Nadim?
I think the licensing of. It's interesting that it's mainly the academic publishers that have done the deals. HarperCollins did their one, but it's mainly the academics that are making the money so far. And on the contract question, we work with about 200 different publishers now, and what I've noticed is that some publishers have written into their contracts, and they did it maybe 18 months ago, we will never use any AI on any of your works or any of our authors, da 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 da. And then they think, actually, we want to use Shimmer's automated advertising, which uses AI, and they go for it, and then somebody pipes up and says, but we promised all our authors. And what was thought to be a good decision 18 months ago is now a bad decision. And you've got these infuriated authors who feel they've been betrayed and promises broken, who actually want what we do, but can't get over the fact that their contract says that it'll never be done. So it's a mess. There's that problem with the contract. And then in terms of payments and negotiation of rights, big tech companies are used to pressing buttons. A catalog comes up, you buy the stuff, you go into an auction for it perhaps, and then you move on. And there's nothing really like that. I think the technology is so limited and the bureaucracy is so great around publishing that tech companies have thought it easier to steal than to go through the riddle and the labyrinth of contracts. And that does need to be sorted out. It needs to be much easier for tech companies to negotiate to buy the content from their publishers.
It also sounds to me as though there needs to be a huge amount of work done to the author community to show both the value, the challenges and the opportunities, so that they go into contracts with their eyes open, with AI clauses.
Yeah, and I think if your agent is saying, I'm not going to license your book for translation using AI, and the author kind of think, I'm very happy with this decision, but given the opportunity to go into several languages using AI, which would not be economic otherwise, I think authors might change their minds. Yeah. But they're not having this debate at the moment, really. Yeah.
Because as soon as you say AI, it sounds as though there is absolutely no HI, human intelligence or human intervention, which, to your point, a human had to interact with the first machine translation. And that in a way, it's a bit like the debate around ebooks. Ebooks are, iniquitous, they're awful, you're not going to see the beauty of the book, the layout of the page, etc. You now have people, BookTok has helped, but you have beautiful editions of wonderfully crafted and produced books, of your favorite books, but you're reading on your Kindle or your iPad or your device, anything that takes your fancy, but you don't necessarily want to keep on your bookshelves. Surely that's the same with the art and craft of literary translation versus machine translation and the pragmatism. You want to?
No, absolutely. It's really. As another area we go into the book is the area of special editions. It's extraordinary the success of that, and as you say, that is upselling in the way that you go to the restaurant and they upsell you the other bottle of wine and things like that. It's more expensive bottle of wine. I mean, people are spending a huge amount of money on these special editions, which are beautiful and look very nice on your shelf, but they might also have bought the ebook at a low price. And so, yeah, ebooks is bringing new audiences to new authors. I mean, it's an amazing opportunity. The risk level for readers is very low with ebooks. They might be priced very low. They're not investing a huge amount of money, but when they love that author, they will then go out and buy a really nice print edition.
Well, Shakespeare is available quite readily on open access, but I was lucky enough to be given a folio edition that is silk encased and retails at £1,000. So, I mean, I illustrate my point.
But still a very nice bottle of wine.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I think we're ending on quite an upbeat point here, that there is huge opportunity for us to discuss in greater depth with a wider audience the fact that AI can be a friend as well as an enemy. We must always bear in mind the potential threat of AI, but in a political sense, in a way. And if you want to learn about it, or indeed publishing in general, Inside Book Publishing, soon to be in a Greek bookstore near you, is a fantastic thing. And the beauty of machine AI-generated translation is here in all its glory. Professor Angus Phillips and Nadeem Sadak, thank you very much indeed. And may I also thank our host, who is Nopi, who made this possible, and of course the Vice President of. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for coming.
Evcharisto.
Thank you.
These gentlemen will stay behind for any questions.